Sorry about that, babe.
After doing a stream where we tried out 3 different SNES RPGs, I decided that the next one that I would cover would be Paladin's Quest, aka Lennus. This is another one that's been on the shelves and in the backlog for years. Frankly, I don't remember this game growing up. I think maybe deep down in my memory crevices I can see the front cover of the SNES release on my local video rental store shelves, but I certainly didn't pay it any mind back then, nor in the middle, and all the way up until recently. Paladin's Quest was developed by Copya System and published by Enix in North America, released in North America on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System in October of 1993. The story. While not groundbreaking, Paladin's Quest offers up a pretty interesting narrative. The game starts out pretty JRPG tropey, where the main character, a boy named Chesney from the magic school, activates an ancient machine known as Dalgren. The activation of Dalgren brings about really bad things and destruction to the world of Lennus. The magic school in town is demolished and Chesney is basically kicked out by the headmaster of the magic school and sent on a mission to destroy Dalgren. Throughout your journey, you will encounter a girl named Midia who is very similar to Chesney, along with a bunch of mercenaries to help your cause. A main antagonist shows up, there's some twists and turns, quests for epic gear, and a touch of time travel. Truthfully, the story is more than adequate, especially given the 1992 release date for the game in Japan. I felt like the translation that we got was good enough. It could be rough in some spots, but overall it read fine to me and I understood what was going on. Well, most of the time, because please bear in mind I am an idiot and I have retention issues here and there. Graphics. This is the technical aspect that makes Paladin's Quest stand out the most to me. From what I've seen, the graphics and color palette seem to be a bit divisive on the internet, but I love them. If you are a longtime follower of the channel, you know that I greatly appreciate games taking risks, blending genres, and being unique, and Paladin's Quest graphics are exactly that. Unique. The world, sprites, and colors have a very distinct look and feel. If you've played the game before, or you're even just seeing it now for the first time, you could definitely say, oh yeah, that's Paladin's Quest. Everything has a very cartoony look to it, almost Earthbound-like in a sense, and Paladin's Quest has a major use of pastel-type colors like yellow, purple, certain shades of blue, pink, and so on. Many of the in-battle sprites are awesome, the headshots of the characters are sweet, and there are so many memorable areas that you'll traverse, like deep dark caves, rainy towns, futuristic areas, and even foggy towns. I can't say enough good things about the graphics of Paladin's Quest. To me, they really nailed it here. Music and sound. Another technical aspect that I've seen lots of back and forth about. Starting with the sound, I think Paladin's Quest does a pretty good job. Many of the spells, attacks, and so on are conveyed well through their sounds and confirmations. It would have been nice had the game had some more ambient noises to add to the interesting atmosphere. Ironically, one of my favorite graphical spots in the rainy town of Jerain, the rain noise actually grated on me over time and I felt like it could have been handled better. But that's an example of the game doing something that I felt could have been improved a bit and expanded upon in other moody areas. Soundtrack-wise, I felt the work of Kohei Tanaka was great. Sure, the soundtrack itself is a bit limited compared to something that Nobuo Uematsu put together. I hate to keep referencing him, but I mean, let's be honest, kind of the golden standard of that era and for the system. But there are a wide variety of memorable tracks that lend itself well to the area that they play in and the mood of the time. Some standout tracks to me are that of Momentary Peace, which sounds like a warm, sunny day in the mysterious world of Lennus, the track titled Calamity, which I believe is first heard in the town of Ratzurk. It really nails that offbeat, not really human sort of caveman feel. Dark Underworld, it nails that underground cave vibe. The battle themes are electric, and there is no shortage of chill-inducing, quote, bigger than you feeling tracks such as Holy Sanctuary, Wandering Spirits, and The Passing of Time. I, for one, really enjoyed the soundtrack of Paladin's Quest, and coupled with the graphics, this game impressed me in a big way from a technical standpoint. Controls. Thankfully, Paladin's Quest is pretty turn-based RPG standard. Traversing the overworld, towns, and dungeons is done with relative ease. The controls feel responsive and I really don't have any complaints. Really, the only spot where things could become a bit hairy is the menuing and battle systems. Frankly, the menuing is pretty clunky, which to be fair is seen across many RPGs of this era. A great example is having a party of 4 needing to heal, but possibly wanting to use your heal items that are equipped to Chesney, and then switching to some lesser heals in your bag. It could be pretty slow and clunky, especially when you consider the natural progression through a tough dungeon, meaning you might need to heal after every battle or two. It's time consuming and a bit maddening at times, leaving you wanting some better quality of life opportunities. Another example of clunky menuing is equipping both Chesney and Midia. In order to equip, you have to go through everything. That means your helmet, your arms, your body, your legs, and your belt. The common theme here is a lot of clicking, and it can become pretty annoying. Another big part of the controls are that of the ones in battling. The battling system revolves around D-pad presses, which at first can be a bit jarring, but I will admit over time you can get into a rhythm, especially if you have your combat strategy down to a T. That being said, there will be times where you easily misclick and have to go backwards, and if you're a little too careless, you can go too far back, having to re-enter your battle strategies once again for an earlier character. And towards the later stages of the game, when you have an abundance of magic spells, the magic menu can seem to scroll endlessly, and it can be hard to pinpoint that specific spell that you want and so forth. Don't get me wrong, I've seen worse in terms of controls. Things are generally responsive and at least the game itself moves and controls well. But it is pretty clunky in the menuing, missing some quality of life features, for example having the ability to heal all somehow would have been great, but yeah, a true sign of the times I guess. Gameplay and fun factor. On the whole, Paladin's Quest is a very fun game. I can never say at any point during my adventure that I was bored or disinterested. Sure, there may have been a few spots that were a tad annoying, possibly overstaying its welcome, but I felt as though it was paced out very well and kept me entertained from start to finish. Now, let's get into some of the things that make Paladin's Quest unique from a gameplay standpoint. First off, there's no MP in this game. That's right, instead the characters who cast magic spells are a direct result or pull from their hit points or HP. This helps add a level of strategy to the gameplay, meaning you can't get too spell spammy at times, especially if you're low on healing items. Furthermore, spells in this game are learned by purchasing spirits at learning centers in various towns. It's very hard to miss spirits as the game gives you plenty of opportunity to repurchase throughout. Lastly, in regards to the magic system, there's nothing which enhances Chesney or Midia's magic through leveling. Instead, the way to raise your magical ability is very similar to something like Final Fantasy II, where you simply cast spells revolving around those spirits. So if you want to level up your fire spirit, you'd cast fire spells. There are also perma-upgrade items in the game for a variety of statistics, including magic, which is the card system for spirit leveling. Piggybacking off of magic once again, you'd be surprised to learn that there are no traditional healing spells in the game. So yet again, Paladin's Quest takes an interesting stand on something, this time in the form of healing. The only way to heal in battle is if you have healing bottles equipped to your character, or you can heal outside of battle with those same healing bottles, or extra bottles that might be in your item bag. Thankfully, replenishing your heals is very cheap and easy in most towns, and of course you still have your standard inns where you could rest up and save. That being said, the healing bottles and magic system lend itself to an interesting strategic balance as you progress through your journey. At this point I mainly alluded to Chesney and Midia, but there are other party members that you can acquire, literally, throughout your quest. As per standard, you can have a party of up to 4 people, and typically those final 2 spots are taken up by mercenary characters. Each mercenary has something unique about them. For example, one might be really good at magic, one might be a tough fighter, and there's even some oddballs late in the game that have huge stats but they can't be healed at all. This helps add some level of intrigue and party building throughout the game, as most mercenaries only join for a price, and with the varying abilities, you may opt to not bring someone along in favor of someone else. You can dismiss a mercenary at almost any time to employ a new one, and even at a certain point you gain items and a spell to re-recruit old mercenaries to your squad if you choose to do so. Though frankly, I didn't find the need for this. It is worth noting that you do not have the autonomy over the equipment that the mercenaries wear, and you cannot purchase spirits for them. So an example here is some mercenaries could heal since they have healing bottles and others can't. Wrapping back around to the battle system, the system itself is reminiscent of something like Dragon Warrior in terms of perspective, but clearly differing in general mechanics. In battle you are able to defend, attempt to run, which by the way seems very consistent and is a major plus for me, as some RPGs are very stingy with running. I didn't find Paladin's Quest to be like that at all. And you could also attack or use a magic spell. The attacking function can actually be pretty funny. Typically you'll use this in order to attack an enemy with your weapon, or use a healing bottle that's on your belts. However, Paladin's Quest actually lets you use just about anything, meaning you could actually attack someone with your helmet. In some instances, certain armors have the ability to do good damage. Also, some equipment have passive abilities or even the ability to cast spells. But again, I'll admit, I didn't take advantage of that, and kept the majority of my battle strategies throughout very simple and straightforward. Another major part of the game that I want to discuss are the dungeons. I find them to be pretty good, and I think that's the best way to describe them. I don't want to get into my negative points here, so I'll just keep it simple. The gimmick dungeons that do exist in the game I quite enjoyed. For example, the Denebra Mountain dungeon with the bridge repair, pretty cool. The Kioku cave, also pretty cool. A lot of them are aesthetically pleasing, feature good loot, and so forth. Some other odds and ends that I enjoyed about Paladin's Quest: surprise attacks. You don't see the enemies at all when they first attack you. Then after their turn is over, the screen scrolls and the enemies are present. I mentioned earlier that I enjoyed the headshots of the party members, as well as these strength or status screens that show the stats, including the amount of experience that's required for the next level. I always hate when RPGs don't really tell you when you're going to level up next, and thankfully Paladin's Quest isn't one of those games. There were also a few instances throughout with rare drop farming, which to me is pretty cool. Some enemies will drop spirit cards, for example, and there's also a rare sword drop for the Gomutai sword, which I made a short about and I'll actually go into it there. So if you want to watch that, check out the pinned comment or description below. And yeah, that was a pretty fun little side quest for me. Also, the party Feld system is generally good. When your teammates die in battle, if you succeed overall, they are then resurrected after battle with 1 HP. But if the entire party dies in battle, it's one of those games where you lose your progress straight up, instead of the somewhat traditional respawn at your last save with your experience gain and gold halved. I'm always on the fence as to whether or not I like that system or the other one, so I guess that's a good segue into critiques. As much as I loved Paladin's Quest, there were a few things that bugged me, so let's get into those now. Let's start with the minor. The graphics and scenery are great, however there are going to be times where you can't really tell whether you're able to walk somewhere or not. I experienced this a bunch early on. Obviously as the game progressed, my mind grew stronger, but I still had instances later on where I thought I could walk somewhere, and I couldn't, or the inverse. I touched on this earlier, but healing with a bigger party of 4 and bigger health pools can be very annoying, slow, and clunky given the healing bottle system. Late in the game you do get Giga Bottles, which are basically full party full heals, but prior to that, healing item management and menuing could be an absolute chore. Going back to the dungeons, in general I do enjoy them, but they can be very point A to point B, especially if the dungeon isn't ripe with a gimmick. I don't like dungeons that overstay their welcome, and Paladin's Quest certainly does not do that, but I almost felt like at times they are a bit too short. Maybe the dungeons could have been expanded about an extra 10 to 15%, and that could have been the sweet spot for me? Who knows? There's also a huge chunk of the game where I feel like it's lacking with new spells, new weapons, and new armor. I remember having a huge wad of cash for a long time as there was, well, nothing really to do or buy. Now later on in the game, towards the end, this does change thankfully, because I was starting to get a little bit worried that we had capped out way before the end, but that was not the case. Alright, let's talk about the elephant in the room. The grinding. Probably the most annoying part of the game, and yes guys, please keep in mind that I am an avid retro gaming and retro RPG fan, so grinding isn't something that I despise whatsoever. But this game does have a pretty consistent grind schedule, and if you don't meet it, especially in the early and mid game, you're gonna likely have a bad time. It was almost like every single bit of advancement early on required grinding, or else. Thankfully the game gets a little bit more well-paced as it goes on, especially in terms of experience gained and difficulty doing so. In fact, I didn't really do much grinding towards the end of the game, because at that point enemies started yielding great experience and gold naturally, which is much more preferred instead of wailing on the same enemies over and over for 30 minutes at every pit stop. This also wraps back around to the magic spirit system. Quite frankly, at some point I stopped caring about magic leveling altogether. Early on I was very headstrong and wanting to get my spirits as strong as possible. But honestly, as the game proceeds, this becomes a chore. It basically interferes with your regular grinding, which I find to be much more important. And by that I mean grinding your spirits isn't the best way to optimize your time for traditional grinding. So in a sense, it kind of becomes a 2-grind system, to which, much like the aforementioned Final Fantasy II, I just gave up altogether on magic grinding, and I went forth with brute force and whatever spirit levels I had. But realistically, that's pretty much all the bad that I had personally with Paladin's Quest. In summation, Paladin's Quest took me by surprise. I thoroughly enjoyed my time in the world of Lennus. The story was fun and engaging. The graphics and color palettes were unique and memorable. The sound and soundtrack were very good. The controls were RPG standard aside from some clunky menuing. The magic spirit system was unique. The mercenary system was pretty fun and an interesting take on party construction. The dungeons didn't overstay their welcome. The difficulty was fair and challenging at times, though a bit grindy. And there's even a decent amount of side questy things and replay value for people that might want to max out all of their magic spirits, or perhaps choose different mercenaries to go along with Chesney and Midia. All things considered, especially with this game being a late 1992 release in Japan, Paladin's Quest was pretty eye-catching, memorable, and advanced for its time. I give Paladin's Quest on the SNES a 8.75 out of 10. I was not expecting to enjoy this game as much as I did, and I've heard that the sequel, the Japanese-only release Lennus 2, is even better. So looks like that'll be on the docket for 2025. If you've enjoyed this review, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. If you want to check out more Paladin's Quest content, check out the pinned comment, description below, or end screen. Take care.